Hello and welcome to SPORcast, a Canadian podcast discussing patient-oriented research. Research done in partnership with patients. I'm Beverly Pomeroy.
And I'm Lisa Ridgway. And we are patient partners who sit on a variety of patient councils and advisory groups, all with the vision to encourage research to answer research questions that matter to patients and aim to improve healthcare.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you will be inspired to get involved and create your own impact in order to support healthcare research be more relevant and meaningful. Please enjoy the show.
In a new home and brought to you from home, SPORcast is back.
And I always say that at the beginning of every show because I really am, Lisa, always excited for our interviews. But oh my goodness, Stirling, 10 months since we first interviewed you at the very first episode of SPORcast. And here we are sort of in our new iteration, post-COVID, or I guess mid-COVID, of having you back. So you're probably one of our bravest guests because you've come back for a second round. So thank you for that. We really appreciate that. And I guess, I don't even know where to start, Lisa. Where should we start our conversation? We've got two phenomenal people here.
No kidding, but we need to let them introduce themselves, especially Danielle, because she's never done a podcast before, and she's watched SPORcast, but she's never been involved. So thank you for you're as brave as Stirling, I must say. And you've only worked in the role that you have now for 10 days or so. So wow, starting off right, and Stirling in the big chair now at the Academic Health Science Network. So thank you very much. But Danielle, let's ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners and to our viewers.
Excellent. Well, thanks. And I think, as you both know, Beverly and Lisa, I've been a big fan of SPORcast since I found out about it. So I've listened to all the episodes, and it's an honor that my first podcast actually gets to be here. So thanks for that. Yeah, I am coming up from the States, even though I've been up in BC for about the past 18 months. I'm quickly transitioning into my role as scientific director in the BC support unit, and I'm super excited about the opportunity that lies ahead. I think the shortest way to introduce myself is to say that this role brings together my two passions. The first and foremost being patient involvement and the research we do throughout the time where we figure out what questions should we be asking, all through the process of taking the results and feeding them back both to the people who participate in our research, but also to our healthcare systems. And that's the second part, is how do we really drive healthcare forward and make that rapid integration of research into practice. So this is my happy place, and it's really great to be here today.
Wow.
Yeah, no, we're super excited to have you, Danielle, and so grateful that this is your first opportunity to speak to us in your new role. I think you're like week 2 or something, or end of week 2. And then of course that brings us to Stirling, and Stirling, a lot has changed in the last 10 months for you in particular, but for BC Support Unit and Academic Health Science Network. So maybe sort of like catch us up, your new role and sort of what that entails for you now.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks so much for inviting me back. There's no bravery on my part. It's an easy decision just to say yes, because I too love SPORcast, and for SPORcast to be the thing that it is just fabulous, and I'll always support it. So I've taken on the leadership role of the Academic Health Science Network. So Tom Noseworthy did a stellar job, came to the end of his term, and there was a seed planted in my mind as to whether I might be interested in taking on that role, and thought long and hard about it, and decided that I would. So I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to lead the Academic Health Science Network in British Columbia. So the AHSN is the home for the BC Support Unit. So it's a sort of natural, for me, it feels like I'm remaining at home, and my role within the support unit as the scientific director, it was transformational for me. Like it really made me realize what patient-oriented research can be, and how powerful and impactful it can potentially be. And so I'm committed to making sure the support unit in BC remains a success, actually becomes even more of a success under the banner of the Academic Health Science Network, And just to say that the other operating units within AHSM are Clinical Trials BC and Research Ethics BC. And I think as a whole, it makes for a very coherent whole. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to play a role in moving the organization forward.
Wow. We should just stop the interview right now. That's enough. But thank you so much. We'll move on to some questions now, but we don't have to stick to script. So if you don't want to answer the question that we ask, it's up to you. But Stirling, we need to know what the best thing about your job is now.
So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question. And like, there are so many good things. I hope you're also going to ask me what the worst thing about my job is.
No.
We'll come to that later. I think the best thing, to be honest, like I was reflecting on like this role, and throughout my career, in many regards, what I've been trying to do is build bridges. I probably don't look like a bridge builder necessarily, but it's sort of metaphorically, that's exactly what I've been trying to do, largely between the academic world and the health system writ large. And so I'm a health economist, as you know, and that's like trying to be applied, trying to make sure that the work we do actually is the right work and has impact. And so the best thing about the job, I think, is that it's very much trying to do that at a provincial scale. So what we're trying to do in the Academic Health Science Network is actually ensure that the research that we do is the right research, and that the research we do is going to have impact in the system. So it's about building that bridge, and obviously, patients, people with lived experience, are central to that endeavor, and should be always central to that endeavor. So that's the best thing about my job, I think, is that I've got the opportunity to continue to build bridges.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you touch on too, is something I've been sort of thinking about too in regards to our conversation today. Is it really about creating that environment where this can flourish and grow, and that we can, really have a deeper impact on health outcomes. So this kind of now switches it over to Danielle, a bit of pressure because it's only been a couple weeks, but what's the best thing about your job or this role that you're sort of being introduced to?
The fact that you guys laid such a great foundation for me to jump into.
Wow.
I would echo everything that Stirling said. And I think when you guys started this in 2016, it really was brand new. And to be somebody coming in at this point and seeing the amazing work you've accomplished and the network that's been built is phenomenal and exciting. I think that helps you really realize that intersection between healthcare and research. And I would say that all of that is really embedded in the people and relationships you get to build moving forward. And I will say in the past 10 days, I have spent, I think, 10 straight days on Zoom and meeting people and participating in meetings. No. Normally that would seem exhaustive, but the sense of energy, passion about improving healthcare, and the collaborative nature across all the different people who either are directly in the support unit or partners with has been phenomenal. So it's been a very energizing first 2 weeks on the job, and to me it shines the spotlight on all of the opportunities that lie ahead. So there's a ton, and prioritizing and focus is going to be important, but I'm excited.
But you started during the pandemic, so much has changed from perhaps when you were even thinking about coming on to the team. I mean, COVID has really changed our world as individuals, societal, healthcare research. I mean, how big is that gap, do you think, between how we used to conduct healthcare research here in BC? So I'm asking you both, please interrupt each other. And then right now in these, stranger than fiction times.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, starting a job with COVID, but also racism that's happened in US, but spurred conversations around the world. Starting a new job with that as your backdrop is interesting. And I think where I will take it as I'm an eternal optimist, is it shows to me, or I think COVID in particular has highlighted where our health system and our health research fall short. And we have an opportunity to move that forward in context, you know, the disparities that exist in healthcare access, even in research, right? And I know you guys are probably sick of me talking about the cultural safety.
No, speak more about cultural safety.
but you know, in truth, it's really made me pause and reflect on the work that I've done. I'm very excited about the work that I've been part of, but I also realize that the shortcomings in what I've done in the past, and having this opportunity to have a platform as a scientific director in an organization with the mission that it holds, you see the opportunity and the responsibility to really use these times and make the best of them, because they have certainly been the worst of times for many. And how we move forward as a society and a research community, I think, you know, this is where we really set that next course. So it is stranger than fiction, and there will be new normal. And I think it's up to all of us to make sure that it's the best new normal that we can create.
Wow. Yeah, very true. And then I guess that kind of shifts to you, Stirling, because you've been a part of this journey, and same sort of question around the current situation we have, whether it is COVID or the anti-Black sort of you know, sentiment that's running, and the racism that's going on in, you know, across the world. You know, what is your sort of perspective on the gaps that maybe COVID you know, has shown or risen to the top?
Yeah, I mean, everything's changed, like, no question. And, you know, I think like the critical piece for us, or for all of us, I think, is to make this a positive change. And I think like what we're seeing is that just how negative a change it is for so many people. And we've got to fight against that. We've got to fight against that. I'll say that again. Like, I think it's imperative that we recognize equity as like the number one sort of principle, and the number one goal that we have is actually about promoting equity. And what we've seen by the COVID experience, increasingly the data is now showing just how damaging to individuals who are marginalized, the poorest in society, the weakest in society. It's you know, like it's amazing how a pandemic can actually really like identify the cracks in society, and just you know, just make those bigger. And that's exactly what I think we've seen. So for me, like, everything has changed, and everything has to be different moving forward because of both the pandemic and then now what we're seeing. I mean, shocking, right? I mean, and in a Canadian context as well. I mean, no question, it's racist behavior, and it's a racist, you know, racism is embedded in so many of our institutions, and we need to fight that too. So I think we need to be part of that fight on both of those fronts. So for me, like, the thing that's different, but we need to be optimistic, and we need to, I'm with Danielle, like, my glass is always, in fact, it's more than half full. You can see that here. And it has to, and we have to say, you know, this is a fight, and we're going to be at the forefront of that fight to make sure that what the pandemic delivers is actually positive for those people who are disadvantaged by society at this point. And if we fail to recognize that, then yeah, we're making a big mistake.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you both for sharing such a vision.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of you know, my question too, unless Lisa, you want to ask this one about, you know, what is the highest priority right now for BC Support Unit? Because I'm sure it may have changed, but, you know, knowing the values of BC Support Unit and Academic Health Science Network, maybe it hasn't changed. So, you know, what from both your perspectives is the highest priority right now for the BC Support Unit in your mind and in your role?
Do you want me to go first, Danielle?
You go first, and then I'll add.
Well, I mean, you know, sustainability, like, we need to have a support unit. So, like, we're at a point now where we're just about to submit a funding request to CIHR. So, like, we need that to be successful, period. Like, and we want to make sure that we get the full funding that we have, because if we, you know, if we take our eye off that ball at this point, then you know, we're not serving anyone. But, like, you know, that said, and sort of that's an obvious one, I guess. But, you know, then I would say that we need to, you know, we've had emphasis previously on diversity, and trying to ensure that we could listen effectively to the voices of those who we don't currently or often hear from. And that's very much been an emphasis we've seen in the methods cluster work in particular that Erin Mahalik has taken forward on patient engagement, as well as some of the other aspects of the unit. And I think that's great, and that needs to be maintained, but we need to take that up like many notches, I think, now, recognizing the equity, like the overarching sort of goal of equity, I think, means that we need to rethink that in a serious way to make sure that we truly deliver on that. So one of the things that we've said that we will do, for example, is we will have a serious commitment to Indigenous health research, and actually, like, that's going to be, I mean, you know, we've got a formal arrangement now with First Nations Health Authority. We've got Charlotte Lopi and the network that she leads as a formal partner within the phase 2 application. So I think, you know, if you're talking inequity in a Canadian context, obviously the very first place that you must go is the Indigenous, the disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, which is shocking and unacceptable, and something that we need to tackle. So for me, the Indigenous health research emphasis is where I would give focus, and that then relates to the broader issue of ensuring that we're moving in the direction of tackling inequities.
And that's good to know, because I didn't mention this on our call earlier, but I start my Indigenous cultural training on Monday, so I can be part of that. And I'm really excited about that, because that's not something in the United States that we give the same focus that I have found we do in BC. And I'm certainly excited to learn with the community and be part of that. So, and I would build on that, I think, you know, it's really transitioning from the phenomenal work of the first 3 years to lay that infrastructure and groundwork, and really in the next few years put it to actions that we think about sustainability long term, where we continue this path of transforming healthcare and normalizing the expectations that patients and the broader public are involved in all aspects of healthcare, which involves how we generate evidence, what questions do we ask, how is that data formed? How do we make sure that there's good data out there and that it gets translated into practice? So I think thinking on the long term, where do we want to be in 5 years, and how do we set those milestones up so we can track our course is going to be really important. And then keeping context of the broader national work in Canada and international work in this space, so that we're not reinventing wheels, but rather pulling in what we can learn from others and sharing back what we have done here, because I think we have a unique and phenomenal province and some really committed folks, and we have an opportunity to share that more broadly as well.
These are really great overarching answers. I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about patient partners in particular, because Bev and I are quite engaged patient partners, and we know as a group we're quite nimble and quick, perhaps because we're not so much embedded within organizations. But how can patient partners adapt to these present COVID circumstances? I don't just mean people that have suffered COVID-19, but I mean all the patient partners that have really bought into patient-oriented research. And then let's talk about researchers too. So perhaps you could divide the question.
Which one do you want to take, Stirling? And I'll start with the other.
I'm happy to take either.
Well, I'll start with patients, because that's my favorite, and then you can figure out how to handle us researchers. You know, I think, so starting with COVID, I think what's really unique about this time is everybody is affected by COVID, whether you have the privilege of just having to stay home, or all the way to being somebody who's been affected by COVID directly within your own health or a loved one. So I think that, you know, everybody understands now the importance of coming together to figure out answers, to work as a community, to progress forward, and to hopefully get past this and get to a healthier society. So in terms of patient partnership, you know, one thing I will reflect on in some of the early work that's happening around COVID is I'm hearing more so than I've ever heard, we need to have patients involved in these conversations. And there's then the next question of how. And so I think from the adaptability component. How do we make sure that we have those voices represented effectively within the work that we're doing, recognizing that some of the folks who have been most impacted, especially with regards to their health, won't have a voice at the table, but that's also an important voice. So we're going to have to use the methods and the work that have been set forth to really adapt those in this context. But more broadly, I think it's not adaptability, it's that opportunity to talk about what patients, partners have done to date in the context of research with their networks and their friends, people who don't even know you can be involved as a partner in research. Because I still think we're a long way away from that being a common understanding that, you know, as a citizen, I have a voice in how this work is done. My experience is an expertise that I bring to the conversation. And we need that, because otherwise we're going to keep coming back to you guys. Hey, can you be part of this project? And then we're going to fatigue the people who are our partners in the work that we do. And we really do need to build out that capacity and look at ways in which we can do that, both through direct engagement, but then also what are new methods that have yet to be developed to make sure that we always have that voice front and center as we're developing the work that we're doing.
Fair. And Stirling, so for researchers, what's your perspective there?
So I think we need to do less research.
That's interesting.
Wow.
I didn't expect that answer.
No. Less research, less is more?
Well, yes. I mean, I think what's been like, we've scrambled. Like, what's happened with COVID is that there's been a scramble, quite rightly, you know, because of the urgency of the situation, for there to be a research response. So the BCHSN on its website, as I'm sure you're aware, has the inventory of research projects being undertaken on COVID in BC. And we have over 300 projects that are happening at the moment in BC. And that's a good news story on one hand. It's a bad news story on another hand. And I think we need to, so I am a glass half full type person, even though this isn't a glass half full story. I think we need to make sure, that we coordinate and we work in a collaborative way, and that we actually see partnership as a positive thing, not as a negative thing in health research. So for me, like, I think, you know, there are some great pieces of work that are moving forward, no question. And I'm not criticizing anyone for the scramble that happened because we wanted to respond quickly. I think that we need now to bring people together, to work collaboratively in this space. You know, I mean, like, just as an example, like, people who've recovered from COVID, you know, we've never had people who've recovered from COVID before. We've never seen COVID before. So, so the question of, like, what the appropriate clinical protocol is for monitoring people long-term who've recovered, but now we recognize that it's increasingly a multi-system disease. So we want to be monitoring heart, obviously lung, kidney, you know, mental health. So, you know, all of this stuff needs to be monitored. And so we're actually needing to bring together all of those clinical specialties to work, because, you know, BC's done a great job, you know, in managing the pandemic, but it does mean that we actually don't have that many patients to research. And so even more in BC do we need to be doing this in a collaborative way. So for me, rather ironically, the answer is that we actually need to do less rather than more, but because I think less can be so much better, and we need to do high quality research, and that's about bringing people together and doing it in partnership, which I think is exactly what a patient-oriented approach is all about.
No, I appreciate that. And I think too, one thing, I mean, there's a lot of good things that are coming out of COVID too. And I think one of the aspects you've touched on, which is that group that has chronic complex disease. And I think those with COVID are now presenting with chronic complex disease and will have chronic complex disease. And then how that now will affect and impact the health of others who don't have COVID, but we do have a large, you know, population with chronic complex disease. So I see, you know, maybe there's some opportunities there for sure. And I guess, so that kind of leads me to my question, in that, you know, we've made a lot of ground in patient-oriented research. I mean, I've been a part of it for such a long time. I'm now sort of on the inside circle a little bit, you know, being out in Fraser Center. And that's so, I guess some of the I guess pushback or criticism, I guess, of COVID is that maybe patient-oriented research, you know, some researchers or some areas, you know, felt it was too heavy of a lift or was too difficult to do in the urgency of COVID. So I think some of the worry is that we've come a long way, right, in patient-oriented research. We really have, and I think we all see that and experience that. But how do we not lose valuable ground, you know, because of the urgency of COVID and maybe the heavier lift that having patient-oriented research, you know, it can occur, right? Which one of you? Yeah, Danielle.
Yeah, I think, you know, not losing ground. I think that goes back to the capacity building. That I think it's not correct for a researcher to say, oh, we don't have resources to, they're not resources, but we don't have networks to do this, because we do. It could be our failure to talk about who we are and what we can do. And I think that's the advantage of having, one of the advantages of having the regional centers exist, because you are accessible and have access to a broader network. So I think that it's constantly pushing back, and not pushing back in a negative way. You don't want it to be confrontational, but offering that it really is possible, and there are different ways to bring people together. I think it's finding the people that you can establish those research or those relationships with quickly. And I think in this context, especially with COVID, people want to help and people want to be part of that. Certainly people with lived experiences that have not had good experiences in the healthcare center, or have had amazing experiences in the healthcare center. They want to make care better for the next person that could come through those doors. We've learned a lot clinically, health system policy wise in the first little bit. And I think that, you know, if you look at how quickly evidence has evolved and how that's been communicated, both in the research community as well as in the Twitterverse, if you will, we're doing rapid learning collectively. Some of it has not been helpful, but it's going to be up to all of us to make the best of this in terms of lessons learned. So I don't think, if anybody were to say, well, I don't have time to do that, I would offer that then you're not necessarily going to be doing the best research. And to Stirling's point, you know, we are going to have to do less research. It's not going to be possible to do all the research studies, that we don't have enough patients, fortunately. So I think we're going to really have to work as a community to prioritize what moves forward and how it moves forward, to respect the people that we're asking to participate.
Thanks. Stirling?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, the journey we're on is about culture change. And, you know, I think we've made great strides. But, you know, like, culture change doesn't come easily for most, you know, unless it's the culture that's in a test tube, of course, but that's not what we're talking about. So, you know, I think we need to sort of understand and actually appreciate that this is a tough journey for some people. But it's a journey that's like fundamentally the right journey. Of course it is, and like we're preaching to the converted in some ways. We actually need to put ourselves in the shoes of those who are not converted at this point, and actually, you know, recognize that it can be difficult to understand and appreciate that, you know, the patient-oriented research can be so powerful, and actually, like, it can enhance the quality of the research that we do. Like, that's the fundamental, like, you know, I fundamentally believe that this is the right thing to do, period. Like, you know, like, yeah. I'll never like go back on that. You know, and this is, you know, having teams that are teams that have partnerships with and include in a full way people with lived experience changes everything in the research that we do, and it enhances the quality of the research we do. What we now need to do, I think, is make sure that we have the impact stories, because we're now, like, we've like changed, we've converted as many people as we're probably going to convert relatively easily, and now we need to, like, start thinking about how do we engage with people who are pretty skeptical, and part of me thinks, like, you know, well, just let them go and do whatever they want to do, and let's not fight that battle. But that's giving up, I think. And so, and I'm not, you know, I'm yeah, I'm highly competitive, and I want to win. But win because it's a battle that's really worth fighting. So I think actually we need to work harder on the stories that we tell, because I think that's the way that we can change hearts and minds for to move in this direction.
Well, I love this language. I love the language of creating capacity. I love the language of a culture change. I love the language of collaboration. So I'm talking about sort of an organizational shift. The AHSN has created a collaborative provincial response to COVID. Can you highlight some of its top features?
So I just want to be clear, like we're part of the provincial research response, and we position ourselves very much to be supporting the provincial research response that was led by Ministry Michael Smith Foundation, and we're a partner in that. So yeah, and that is, I think, has been, you know, that was definitely where I think it was important that we tried to bring that sort of collaborative spirit. So I would point to one major success. I mean, I think there are many successes, of course, like HSN has had many successes, but let me just talk about one.
Okay.
And that would be through Research Ethics BC. So if people haven't met Terry Fleming, you need to, I don't know if she's been on SPORcast, but yep. She has. Perfect. Apologies for not knowing that. But Terry has led the work that Research Ethics BC has done to create a single research ethics process in BC. And that's like not a small achievement, it's a major achievement. And yeah, I mean, so like provincial research on COVID goes to one ethics board and gets a single approval, or at least has a single process. Sorry, it doesn't necessarily go to a single board, but it has a single process and a rapid process. So, you know, I think like these are the sort of things that, you know, we've shown that we can do this, and we need to understand then, like, how do we ensure that we have the legacy of some of these pieces moving forward. So I think that's what I'm trying to give emphasis to now, is ensuring that the improvements in the research infrastructure in BC that we've achieved can be maintained.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I guess my question too is about just, I mean, you're both leaders, you know, in patient-oriented research or in research in general, and are stewards of that. And I'm just kind of curious, do each of you have a story, you know, that how COVID-19 has impacted your leadership, you know, in this area? I'm just kind of curious if either one of you have had that within your roles of leadership, how it's impacted, how COVID has impacted that. Danielle, maybe we'll start with you since you're kind of fresh on the scene.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I started COVID really directly working with the University of Washington. A lot of my colleagues are in Seattle and have been taking care of patients. I come from the Department of General Surgery and have friends who are across the country in various capacities of taking care of patients, or trying to figure out how they are going to take care of their patients when their patients aren't the ones that have been prioritized for care, right? So elective surgeries and some other aspects. And then pivoting up here and living in BC, on the other side of a border that's closed, I think, you know, the personal impacts of how that informs the work that you do and how you approach your work. And we talked early on about starting a new job and taking a new role and a new responsibility, where it's pivoting a little bit away from my own direct research. That's still a portion of what I'll maintain, but really supporting a platform of a network and a community of people who want to partner together for research. So as I said before, you know, you take this backdrop of really seeing some of the inequities of healthcare and how we do research and how we build even the pipeline to make sure that the people who are at the tables don't look like me. They look like the communities that we live in. To me, the thing I see moving forward in terms of leadership is making sure that we continue to build, to Stirling's point, that long journey of culture change, and that we always stay in that path, and in times like this, push it forward faster if we can. But also thinking about training and capacity in our own organizations and how we how we as an organization emulate what we expect of our colleagues and of our communities, our research communities at large. So I would say it's not directly affecting me in the last 10 days in this role, but it's infusing in me the things that I want to set as priorities moving forward.
Stirling, do you want to share a vignette?
Tell me that the vignette is like too long at this point, and then we can move on. So we won't go on for too long. So my vignette would be, so I went to a meeting in February, the second week of February in Edmonton. So last time I flew on a plane to be part of so we're doing some work at HSM with Carol Estabrooks, who's at the University of Alberta. She leads the TREC program, Translating Research in Elder Care. And it was all about putting a big grant in to government to improve the quality of life for people who are in residential care, long-term care. And our big challenge, like that we were facing in that meeting, was how do we make this a priority for government? How do we make the quality of life for people in long-term care? And that was like, and we spent a day like strategizing about how we can actually get the attention of government on this topic. And now you think like the world is such a different place, and now thank heavens the way that we treat seniors and people with dementia in this country and internationally is shocking, and that needs to change. And I think that again is like one of the things that we need to make sure that we see as a positive outcome of the pandemic, is that we at long last start recognizing that care aides are doing a job that's a hugely valuable job, and they deserve to get reimbursed, so that they don't have to work two jobs to make ends meet, or even 3 jobs to make ends meet. So that would be my sort of vignette about how, I think like that work that Carol Estabrooks is leading, like that needs to be funded big time, so that we can really improve the quality of life of residents and families for those in long-term care.
Yeah, it's just it's so interesting how COVID is doing that. I kind of equate COVID right now, like listening to what both of you are saying, is, I don't know if any of you guys ride a bike, but when you have a puncture in your tube and you can't find it, and you roll your tube into soapy water and you see where the holes are and you can see where to patch. And that to me seems like the analogy for what's happened, in healthcare because of COVID. COVID's a little bit like that soapy water, and we're now seeing where the holes are. And I'm super grateful that we have leadership like both of you that are sort of tackling that with that inequity sort of voice, because that's a huge soapbox of mine is inequity in healthcare in general, but just inequity in community. So I really appreciate that. And Lisa, do you have like one final sort of question for our phenomenal guest today?
No, I'm just eternally grateful that you could spare the time, because this is all about to bring it back to what you said, Stirling. It's sort of like translation. We're all trying to speak the language, and we're all trying to speak the same language. So thank you so much for being here. Any last thoughts for either of you as we sign off?
My final comment was SPORcast rocks.
Oh, and guess what? We're now getting coffee cups. Can you believe it, Stirling? We've gone up now, right? We've ranked up now with SPORcast. So instead of just a button, you're going to get a coffee cup now. Danielle, what about you? Like newest member of BC Support Unit, we're going to leave the last word to you.
Well, actually, I'm going to toss it back to you. I'm 10 days in, and what do you guys think I should focus on, or what's one thing you think I should keep top of mind as I go into my next 10 days and hopefully make it past that?
Oh, Lisa, you can touch that first.
We're your fangirls. Just rock it. Just do what you do. You do it very well. You're here for a reason. We are very excited to work with you at the BC Support Unit. Thank you so much for coming up.
Yeah, thank you both so much for being a part of our new iteration of SPORcast, and we look forward to collaborating with you, but with both of you, in the next coming weeks and months. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much.
SPORcast is now zoomed to you. courtesy of hosts and creators Bev Pomeroy and Lisa Ridgway. With the able assistance of a small but mighty team of production partners at the BC Support Unit, powered by Communications Lead, Justin Otteson, Project Manager, Michelle Duffy, and me, SPORcast's technical producer and occasional announcer, I'm Kent Cadigan Loftskard.
If you'd like to get in touch with us and learn more, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at SPOR_cast. That's SPOR, SPOR _cast, CAST, #SPORcast. We can also be reached via email at sporcast1@gmail.com or visit our website, www.sporcast.ca.